Growing pains. It's not that complicated, it's just me experiencing a bunch of pain while trying to grow food. The idea being that you can avoid some of the mistakes I make, and hopefully, by extension, a lot of the pain I experience. Microgreens. What are they and why grow them? Microgreens are a great first plant to grow when starting your garden. Gardening takes time, and it would be discouraging to fail on a first attempt after months, which is why microgreens are perfect, as they're exactly like regular greens but for impatient people, and you can harvest them within less than a month. Microgreens only need about an inch or so of soil, so you can plant them in pretty much anything. Pie dishes are quite popular, but since I didn't have one, I made do with this weird box thing. Now you can see here how I'm just haphazardly chucking the seeds in there. Don't do this. The package that the seeds come in should give instructions on planting, and this is going to come up later. From this point on, all you have to do is keep the soil moist and make sure that it gets significant light. This is where a clear covering that lets light in but retains moisture, like a pie tin lid, would come in handy. I would say that the tinfoil acts kind of like the lining in grow tents to reflect light to maximize efficiency, but honestly, I'm keeping it in there kind of just as an excuse to have some cool looking b-roll. Also, quick tip, don't put your phone at risk just for a mediocre overhead shot. Now comes the hard part. The first day you'll turn on a light and give the soil a spritz every once in a while with no signs of life. You will do the same on the second day, but you might spend more time searching for signs of life. On the third day, you will lose hours gazing into the light, as well as on the fourth. It is possible that if you look too long, the soil will look like it's breathing. This is completely fine as long as you remember that what you're seeing isn't real. If you wake up the next day, you should find some little sprouts. From here, if you've done all the previous steps correctly, there's not much to do but water and wait. Now looking at this footage, you might be thinking that the plants are dying or struggling due to their strange color. This is just a result of the color of the light. You see, plants look green because they absorb red and blue wavelengths of light but reflect green. So it would waste electricity to shine any green light at the plants to reflect. That being said, a white light would make it easier to check up on the condition of your plants. At this point, some of my little guys were falling down before it was time to harvest. This is a result of the haphazard planting I was talking about earlier, and this won't be the last time I mess up something like this in the series. To harvest, just get some scissors and chop away. After all that work, I got less than a handful, and when I tasted them, they just tasted like leaves. I threw the rest in a burrito, and I didn't really notice them in the burrito. That being said, I think this was an important first success when it comes to gardening. Now, lettuce seemed like the obvious next step, as it's pretty much microgreens but for longer. Growing the lettuce started off well. I planted the seeds and soon I had seedlings, but the container I planted them in was a bit small, so I transplanted them outside soon after. Along with the transplanted seedlings, I also planted some seeds directly into the planter. Something was eating my seedlings, and after a few weeks there was nothing left in the planter and none of my attempts to stop the thieves was successful, so lettuce ended up being a bust. Next, I started some onions, which never sprouted. Along with the basil. The basil died before it had ever really lived, which is to say, it didn't sprout either. Radishes were up next, and I was a little disheartened at this point, the only success I had being the microgreens, but nevertheless I went forward. I planted 3 in a pot, and as soon as they sprouted, I proceeded to weed out 2 because I didn't think I would have enough space. Unlike my previous outdoor attempts, though, the radish plant did not disappear, and instead it grew. It grew quite a bit, too. After 3 months of sorrow and failure, I was ready for a win again, and the radish plant was bigger than any I'd ever seen, so I had high expectations come harvest time. And yeah, that was a moment where I needed to step back and take a few deep breaths. I don't even know if you can technically call what this is a radish, because it's kind of just a red root, but I was going to try and eat it anyway. which was a mistake, because if you can't tell from my facial expressions in this video, it wasn't exactly edible per se. That being said, I still had one hope for success. There were still potatoes left. The potatoes were the very reason I started this project. For the longest time, I wanted to grow them. To plant a potato, you simply put the potato in ground and water it. My potatoes started off very well, and things were looking good. Of course, as soon as I had that hope, it was ripped away from me once again, as each one of the potato plants fell, withered and yellow. Some of the plants rallied and sprouted new leaves, and those were green. So after 3 months, I still harvested them, but that did not go well either. After dumping the first pot, I knew that my worst fears would be confirmed, as there was nothing but a few tiny little potatoes in there. Second pot, same thing, tiny potatoes. Third pot, same thing, tiny potatoes. I was in the morose depths of failure. And yet, in the final pot, I found my salvation. It tasted exactly like any other potato, but when I was eating it, I found myself reflecting on this project as a whole. I was reflecting on lessons learned, what I could have and probably should have done differently. And as it goes, my mind ran beyond the scope of this project to my time at Scott Scoop and journalism in general. Again, there were many mistakes made and lessons learned, as well as some that are not learned that I probably should have. And after 3 years, the first thing that comes to mind isn't the subpar videos I made, or the awards, or the goofing off, the long hours, or the late nights, but the people I met. And as I reflect on all this stuff, I'm sad I have to leave now. I'm gonna miss you guys, but it's about time to go on to bigger and better things.